Hello, this is me, Rene Perez. I will be talking about misconceptions about the languages recorded in the Chronicles by Pané and Las Casas. In my opinion, Pané and Las Casas kind of pretty much recorded a little better than Pané, but Pané was a little bit more complex to read, and especially on the Taino Mythology about that bay and the creation stories. The reason I have an issue with Pané because some of his diaries were a little complex, and another thing, he wasn't fluent in Taino language. He was more fluent in Macuri, and it's a lot of things he got wrong. Maybe a little bit right, but you really have to really pay attention to some of his work. A good example is what he would do is he would use a lot coming from he would understand the myth coming from more of a European perspective, coming from a Christian point of view, like Las Casas, and that's the way they interpret things, like Abito, Atabe, and Yamao. So most people don't understand is that Yamao is actually his interpretation of Atabe having 4 to 5 names, if I'm mistaken. But what a lot of people don't understand is that Yamao is actually a Catalan word, and Yamao is spelled in in Pané's account is Y-E-R-M-A-O, but when you go to the Catalan translation or dictionary, it's G-E-R-M-A, but the O is just like silence, like Henma or Henmao. And in Spanish, we get the word hermano, right, brother. And apito is actually a Portuguese word, meaning to be, So there's a lot of things we have to really take into account when you're reading a lot of, most of these people who recorded the Chronicles. You really gotta be careful of some of the stuff that's been written. And they weren't good ethnographers. They were talking about 500 years ago. And people also use Peter Montier as a source. But you got to remember, he never went to the islands. He was recording more people. He was actually basically recording people coming back from the islands. And he had maybe some good sources. Sitting down and telling people telling him the experiences in the islands and stuff. So, but Pané, I believe he had some help understanding some of the Taino language. I think he had a friend, I believe, who was considered the first converted Christian. I forgot his name, but his family were the first converted Christians in the Caribbean. And he actually died. His people killed him. They called him a traitor. But while he was getting burned, he was actually best friends with Pané. When he was getting burned, the last words he said was adios na bodi adacha, meaning basically, God, I am your servant, or God, I am your messenger. And he died. That was his last words. But another thing with Pané, another mistake that he made was he was recording an experience. He was recording one of actually a great, the way that the Tainos were fishing, and they were very proficient hunters. And in one of his diaries, he says that they were take a suckerfish and they throw it in the water. A suckerfish is something that they sucks into something, and they would throw it in the ocean, and they would go into they would catch a turtle because it would suck on the turtle's shell, and they would lift it. But he made a mistake. He actually says that the Tainos call it pescado. You see what I'm saying? So he's using is interesting that pescado, we all know that is a Spanish word for fish, But the correct term I believe that he meant was waikan, which is for the sunfish. That is the correct term for the fish. And he didn't write that, he just called it pescado. So there's a lot of things we really got to take into account, especially the ceremonies that was recorded. Now, a lot of people like Las Casas. I know a lot of people love Las Casas. I love Las Casas too. I love his things, and he does have some great points. But just because someone lived among them as a kid for many years and studied them, doesn't necessarily mean he understood the spirituality and the mythology of them. Just because a person is a priest for so many years doesn't necessarily mean he understands the Bible, right? Or Catholicism in any sort, and so because they still, in my opinion, they still looked at him as an outsider. Now, in South America, when you see a stranger, you can live among them, they would still consider you an outsider. You know what I mean? You're not an initiate of them. And some of the shamans would speak a different language than some of the Indians that were amongst their tribe, because they're very secretive in some of the practices, the spiritual practices that they practice in shamanism. And they went to go to some very ordeals and initiations in order to become a shaman. Very difficult at the time. So he was still considered as an outsider. A great example, they recorded the duho, right? And they called it the bench seat. And the shamans would use a bench seat. But this is the thing. They didn't understand why there were animals drawn on the bench seat, right? And some of them are depicted as turtles, some are depicted as snakes. But the reason that there are animals on the bench or the duho is because these are the animals that journey with them when they become on the medicine. You see? So this duho was actually lined up with the stars, and this is the animals that take the journey with them. But this wasn't written by them because they didn't understand that. The Casas didn't understand that. But this is very common in South America amongst the shamans. There's a lot of misconceptions with languages and myth about Wanyahona and Juan Bonito. Again, Pané calls her Juan Bonito. That's another misunderstood word. Bonito in Catalan means a little beauty or a little fish, but it means something that's like cute, because of the tiny fish. It's bonito, and Juan Bonito being found in the water when I was going through a journey, you may think she's a fish or a mermaid, right? But what she is a water spirit, and this is very common amongst every culture. The Mayans, the North American tribes in the Americas and South America, they call them Guasicoto, Kukulkan. So there's a lot of these water spirits, but they're female water spirits. These water spirits would give pleasure and teach the individual the secret mysteries of the medicine. In the story of Wanyahona, he goes into a journey and he sees this beautiful woman in the ocean. He saves her, according to Pané, and she teaches him, or she cures him because he has something with his skin, problems with his skin, and she cures him. And she teaches him, and she gives him CBBs, or little rocks, because he's become the first shaman and the first man to learn the mysteries of the shamanism. And the rocks are for the maraca, which is very common among shamans. The maraca is very spiritual, which I will get to on the next. So the maraca, which is very common among shamans. Juan Bonito giving Wanyahona the rocks, You see, rocks are very spiritual amongst natives. And rocks they're like conduits, right? Like metal is a conduit for cold, because when it gets cold, it gets extremely cold, and it's a conduit for cold, and for heat. So rocks are like a super conduit. They hold spirits, according to the shamans. But what they are is that they are fundamental ideas. Why? Because the maraca, the calabash that's created, which is a fruit, we say this in Taino, called the higuera. And the maraca is depicted as the human head. And according to some South American languages, maraca means Pleiades, the constellation of Pleiades, which Pleiades is the constellation in Taurus, the second sign of the zodiac, the bull. And on that constellation, sometimes there are 7 stars, which we all know, but sometimes they're depicted as 9, without the human eye. But Pleiades is sometimes depicted as a serpent. So the maraca sometimes depicted as a serpent's head, with serpent. Anyways, so the maraca means Pleiades. So Pleiades, according to the natives, was depicted as the head, is where the head is. And the maraca, the circular part of it, is the female symbol. It's the feministic part of the instrument. Now the handle is the phallic, which is the male symbol. And when those two together, it creates a unison between the masculine and the feminine energies. Because the indigenous culture always said, they always believed that each spirit has a companion. They always have a partner. Female, male and female. Always has a partner. And so the maraca is depicted as the human head, but the pebbles are the fundamental ideas. So when you shake them, those ideas become manifested. So it's when shamans, when they use the maraca and they're trying to cure someone, they're trying to use some sort, to an ignorant mind, or like the Christians who were there, they call them witch doctors, which is the wrong term. But they thought, they would use bad spirits. Some Tainos call them maboya. And so they would shake them and to cure them, and this is still been practiced. We use this in salsa, But so the maraca was that was the story of Juanito giving the secrets to him. And some people believe this is the story of the sun and the moon, because there's the same myth in South America about Arawanili and Oreyu. Oreyu means a water spirit. She was a female water spirit who gives pleasure to Arawanili. And Arawanili, he becomes the first shaman. It's where the word Arawak comes from him. So he becomes a hero and becomes the first shaman who learned the secrets of the mysteries of you could say, the universe, right? But of course, all these stories and myth are based on stellar. I would like to get into Atabe now. Pané says that Atabe is this. Well, he doesn't specifically say that she's a frog. I think Pané says Atabeda, and I think Las Casas calls Atabe. But what does Atabe is? Who is she? Is she's this frog person? I mean, we really don't know if this Atabe is depicted as this image of an amphibious creature, or the image. We really don't know. It's as Peter said. He said it was attributed by us. It was attributed by us. So we really don't know if that image is Atabe. We could be Itiwakahobapa. We don't really know. So we're only going for what was told in the Chronicles. But you got to understand, Europeans didn't understand the spiritual concepts and the stories, what the Indians were saying to them. You understand? Very difficult. You know, you can't. You're talking about a culture, Spanish culture, who didn't understand the Indian language. You know. But yeah, so we really don't know if Atabe is this frog. You know, we really don't know. But why the frog? Right? Because if you look at other, if you look in Puerto Rico and Atuado, there are artifacts there in Caguana. And these artifacts, they have the same positions, embodied positions of Atabe, but they look different. But why do they look like frogs? Frog legs or like this. So in South America, the reason they have sometimes depicted as frog legs because a frog leaps. A frog can jump. It's one of its characteristics. As you can see, it's green and frogs jumps. So in a way, to the Indian, a frog leaps. It leaps to heaven, goes up to the sky, so it jumps. So sometimes you may see the images, the leg bends, it's probably jumping and hands out. Not a fact, it's just probably a theory, but this is just according to some, you know, I'm just going for what we say to some cultures in South America. I'm not saying that Tainos are put in like that. Some of the things that, you know, you have to see is the belly and the legs, you know. But what's very interesting is that now we get into Atabe's son, Yokahu, who according to Pané is the god of the yucca. And we really don't know if Yokahu is a real name. But you want to know my opinion? I believe Yokahu is the same as Loco from the Carinago, and it's the same as Loco from the Loconos. Because Yokohu or Loco is the same peer, it's the same exact person. I can prove this, but I will write about that soon. I think I made a post about that on Facebook. But anyhow, so according to the Carinago, Loco was the first man with a big nostril. He had the god had a big nostril, and Loco came from this nostril. Why the nostril? Because air is life. You breathe. So became life. Loco became the first man. And Loco wasn't born from no woman. He had no mother. He had no father. He didn't have a father. He was fatherless. So, but Pané calls Yokahu Pagua Maracote, which I don't believe is his name. I believe it's discussing who he is. Yokahu Pagua, the water. Maracote, without father or without ancestor. Because Loco was born without a father, without ancestor. And Atabe is, in my opinion, is the god of the waters, according to Jose Aram's book of Pané. And he used, you know, according to him, which I do agree with, she's the goddess of the waters. But Atabe means principle, a birth to something. And it's a principle of something, the beginning of something. It's not exactly the gods, but she's the beginning. But Ata means mother too, so it could be mother of the waters. And so if you look at what Yokahu is, Yokahu Pagua, water, Maracote, one person without a born from the waters, without a father. Who's the waters? Atabe, mother. So Loco is sometimes spelled Yoko, with a Y, just like Yokahu. But which I will get to in the next section. So Loco and Yokahu are the same individual. In Puerto Rico, or in Borinquen, we have a town there called Luquillo Beach, which is by El Yunque. And the story goes that Luquillo protects the mountains of El Yunque. And but Luquillo, if you look at the term Luquillo, sometimes Luquillo is spelled Yuquillo, or Y. And or like Yucca, right? Or Yokahu, like Yucca. He's the god of Yucca. But the term Luquillo is both a native term and Spanish term. That's why it's Loquillo. And Loco is in the Carinago myth is the first man who came from the sky, the first man. So Yokahu, he was the firstborn of Atabe, first man. So these are the same individuals. and they both, it's spelled with the L, spelled with the Y, like the Locayans. The Locayans were the local people, but they're not exactly called. It was just a term that Las Casas used. But Cayo, the people of the island, Locayans. So I just want to get into this thing about the Caribs before, just to change a little bit. So Caribs is the wrong terminology. They never used to call Carib. It was a misconception coming from, again, the European point of view that they didn't understand. But the Carib is very controversial where this word originated from. Some people believe it was already been told. It was a word that come from calypso, which Shakespeare mentioned. But then again, Shakespeare may have heard the stories of Columbus coming from the Caribbean and may have put in that in his diary. So that's another theory that he mentions Caribs too in one of his little poems, or little movies, little scriptures and stuff like that. But so the original name for them were Kalinagos, or the Kalinas. Kalina is actually a root term to this day in South America. They call themselves Kalinas, but the original name of them was Galibi, was the original name for Carib. Kalina, we don't know. It could be just an Arawak name that was called Kalina. But anyhow, when Columbus went to Dominican Republic, when he encountered the natives there, they told him that they thought that he were the Caniba, according to what was written by Las Casas. Caniba or Caliba, he was just, and this is where the word cannibal comes from, because the story goes that the Canibas were very, very warlike and they were eating people, but I can discuss why that misconception was that way. But what they were originally saying was Kalina, not Caniba, you see? So that was the misconception coming from Las Casas. Now, if the Kalinagos if we knew the name of the Kalinas, which is the Kalinagos, then they knew our names, and they actually did. And they called us Arawajes, or Arawajes, Arohes, which is the word for Arawak. That's what they called us. This is recorded by the French, okay, not me. You can read this. So that's what they call their enemies in the islands, which was, you say, the Taino people. And now it was recorded that they only ate their enemies, the Oroajes, the Arawaks. But sometimes, and now, this is the Caribs now, Kalinagos. When there was an eclipse, they actually thought that was the Maboya that were being something evil on them. So they would have to do it. And this is kind of a little disturbing, I know, but they would drink a baby's blood to overcome the evil thing of the eclipses. Now, they weren't savages. It was just, we didn't understand the spirituality they were coming from. They weren't savages. They weren't, it was just a way of life. That was the way they were brought up. Just their way of life and spiritual practices. But yeah, that's what they called us, and we called them Kalinas, and they called us Arawajes, Arawak. But Taino just stuck. We all know that misconception came from Constantine in his book. Yes, so they were, everybody knows the story that the Kalinagos would go into the islands and take the wives of the Tainos and marry them, and creating this bilingual society, and the babies, the kids would talk Arawak to the mother and Caribbean, as they call it, or Kalinago, to the father, creating a bilingual society. What most people don't understand is that the Kalinago people have more than one dialect. The old men spoke a different dialect, and even some of the women understand this. So this is what I'm saying about shamanistic practices. Some of the shamans spoke a different dialect that the Indians didn't understand it because they weren't initiated. And the initiations were tougher than the people that they're doing now. I mean, you see people now, they're going through shamans and stuff like that. But at that time, to be a shaman in cacique was very, very difficult. I mean, the caciques had to understand plants, medicine. They have to do the same thing as a shaman. I mean, I don't even want to be a cacique if that was the case. It was very, very difficult. You have to know everything, the whole land, And this whole misconception about caciques too has to really bring into some break it down too, because they were female caciques too. Cacique just means head of the house, you know, and he was just the head of the house. The women were head of the house, you know. So, you know, this is the thing I wanted to get into about the misconceptions of the Caribs. So what I wanted to get to next was I wanted to actually talk about one thing about Las Casas, but I just remember something. And the Chronicles of Las Casas, when he went to Dominican Republic, as Quisqueya. According to Cranberry, he's Quisqueya, or sometimes they call it a different name. They call it Bojillo, they call it an ID, they call it Quisqueyans. I mean Quisqueya. He met a native with an earring in his nose, and they call it Karakuri. So this is misconception that Karakuri means nose ring. It doesn't mean nose ring per se. What it actually means is, it's actually Karukuri. You know, you see? And what it means is, it means half moon golden plate. And if you look at a nose ring, it looks like a half moon. It doesn't mean nose ring, it's half moon golden plate. Apparently to the Europeans, it was a symbol of the eagles. Why? Really don't know. But Kuri means gold, if you want to put it, because the Wayu, I believe is the Wayu, they call Kuri gold. Okay? Now I want to get into the Itiwa Kahubaba and Diminan Karakaracol. One thing is, I noticed, I did find something interesting, that Karakara means falcon in some South American languages. But according to Pané, Itiwa Kahubaba gives birth to 4 sons. Now Brinton believes, and this is a possibility too, I mean I believe it too, that the 4 brothers were the 4 directions, the 4 cardinal points, east, west, north, and south. You know, astrology, Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn, the 4 opposites, or the cross. But you know, you notice that in every culture they always have 4 brothers, always. You know what I'm saying? This is just very common. It's always 4. The Mayans have 4. The Aztecs have 4. The Zapotecas have 4. In Egypt, Horus had 4 sons. In his coffin, he had 4 sons, the little 4 jars, the sons of Horus. So you always had these 4 things, because 4 were just, you're always going to see 4, 6, 9, and 12, and these, and then 3, and sometimes 2, you know, in these things. So why these numbers? It's 3 just means father, mother, and son. 4 is just the 4 cardinal points, the 4 elements. 7 because 3 is the women. 3 is man, 4 is woman. So the reason is that men are 3-dimensional, women are 4-dimensional. So 3 plus 4 is 7. You understand? Why men are 3-dimensional? Because men have 4 brains. You know, we have, 3 brains. We have the brain, we have the stomach, we have the genitals, you can say. Because the brain is the stomach. Women have 4, which men doesn't have, which is the breast. So that's the 4th brain. Okay? So 3 plus 4 is 7. You're always going to have these, the 7 planets, you know, they always talk about these. But yeah, Itiwa Kahubaba, Diminan, I know there's a possibility that there is, you know, this is just a theories. There's a glyph in the Dominican Republic with this man, well, in North America, they call him Cocopelli. And Cocopelli was this man playing the flute. In South America, a woman weren't allowed to play flutes for ceremonial reasons. It was just very, very sacred to them. But apparently Cocopelli in North American was a god of fertility. Sometimes he was with a hump playing the flute. And this, you can see this in Dominican Republic, they have this glyph. Is it possible Tainos came to the North America? Yeah, it's possible. Is it possible some people went to Dominican Republic and probably bring this glyph? That's possible too, because this is not found in Puerto Rico. It's very different. So this image is like a hump, and Diminan was a hump, a man with a hump. The only thing that this is possibilities, and he just had one little thing. He had he gave birth to a turtle, and this turtle was the brothers came and they put an axe with the back, according to Pané, and gave birth to the turtle, and they all supposedly had sex with the turtle and, you know, gave birth to the things. But that's just coming from a European perspective, you know. Probably doesn't mean necessarily mean sex, you know. We really don't know what it meant, you know. We really would not know. And Jose Barrero actually talked about that, and he was actually correct that sometimes the Europeans would talk about the sex part, but I don't believe it was the sex thing. Perhaps, we really don't know. But you notice the turtle was sometimes in North American tribes they call Earth Turtle Island, you know. But why a turtle? Turtle is old, it's wise, wisdom. It can explain a lot of things. They're amphibian, they can be on land, they can be in water, you know. Turtles also are a symbol for women's menstrual cycle, because sometimes certain turtles, not all turtles, some shells are different, but some shells, like a leatherback turtle, I believe, may have 28 kind of boxes on the back, and 28 is the number of the moon cycle, or 28 and a half, 29. And the moon cycle is the feminine, it follows the woman's menstrual cycle. So sometimes the turtle is that too, depicts as that. And some natives follow that, you know. Today, back in the ancient times, they used to follow their fingers because there are 28 phalanges in the fingers. And some people will follow the menstrual cycle using the fingers, the phalanges, the lines of the moon. You know, the turtle was sometimes used for that. Sometimes the turtles were used to making casabe. You know, in Dominican Republic, the Quisqueya still do this to this day to make casabe bread, to flatten the bread. You need the shell of a turtle. And but that's another thing. So back in the times too, like for casabe, when they do initiations, the only thing that you're doing when you're fasting is eating casabe. So what I forgot to mention was I wanted to talk about, again, because there's many times we talked about this, we actually wrote an article about it, is the word Taino. And I wrote about this with Jorge Estevez, a very good friend of mine. We work a lot together. Very good guy and very good researcher. The word Taino, it's okay to be used today. Nothing wrong with it. You know, it differentiates us from other tribes around the world. When you hear the word Mayan, you know that's from Central America. If you hear the word Locono, Guarani, Wayu, you hear that's from South America. But if you hear the word Taino, you know that's the Caribbean Americas. You know, so it's okay to use it. People know. So it's been stuck there, and it's okay. You know, but the term wasn't used back then. They never called themselves Tainos. It's a misconception from Dr. Chanca, Peter Maria, and Las Casas, who recorded Ni Taino. But if Taino is so related to Arawaks from South America, how come the suffix or the prefix and the prefixes of the Taino, the word Taino, is not the same? Like there is the word Thai doesn't fit. The word, which is supposed to mean good, doesn't fit in other languages, other Arawakan languages to mean good. You see, so it just doesn't make any sense. You know, because we can actually trace other words that Tainos use in South America, which means the same thing. You know, like yuca, cocuyo, which we still use in Puerto Rico, cocuano. Kalnagos call it cocuyo, Loconos call it cocuy. So you can see what I'm getting at now. So. And you know, but the word that the most related language that was closer to the Taino people were the Kainago people who lived among us, who battled with us, who fought with us, and fell in love with the Taino people's wives. They called us Arawajes, which means Arawaks, according to the French, the way they spelled it. And they knew our name, just like we knew their name. So. The word Taino in the Kainago language is actually in the Kainago language. They call it Tingno. And the word Ni Taino in Kainago is Ni Tingno. You see what I'm saying? But what it means, my relatives, my people, my friends. So all what it means. Doesn't mean good people. Okay? Now the thing is that like some people believe they call it Tiao. It's probably another short version for Tiao. Right? Because you can actually make Tignon to Tia. You can say for friend. You see? And we've been using Thai. And if you think about it, we've been using Thai, but we just never caught it. Right? I believe in Dominican Republic they use Dai Da, which means like an older relative or a grandfather or something like that. So they've been using it. But the thing is, see, Jorge Estevez, a friend of mine, he made a very good point about something, where this term good came from. See, and this is just a possibility. It's nothing, could be just theories, but it's a possibility and it's very likely. See, in Italy, there's a town called Taino, and which means good vine. And it comes from the word taginus, from the Celtic word. When the Europeans of Dr. Chanka came into Guantelupe and he heard these natives, saying Taino, Taino, when you read his thing, he actually specifically says as if they were saying peace, 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 good, good. Because the word sounds so similar to the word Taino that's in Italy. So this is the misconception of the word good comes from that. Because remember, the Europeans were recording what sounded very similar to their language. Okay, so they weren't fluent. They didn't understand. Some of the natives spoke using the throat. Some words coming from the teeth. They never rolled the R's. So there was just a lot of things, like the word, like I said it before in the video, ganiba. And they never said ganiba. It was galina. You see, so there's a lot of little points there that can make this little simple mistake, and believing that this can mean good or anything, because they were just going for what they know in their language, which is this whole false thing. But if you really want to look into the pages that we do a lot of language stuff there in Facebook. You can follow us on Facebook. Taino language, Bohio, what's the name?
Tainene.
Tainene. If you go on that Facebook page, we post a lot of stuff there. It's very interesting. We have a lot of people there. Some people comment. I'm actually working on another article with Jorge Estevez on the word Jibaro. I'm trying to investigate more of the mythology of the Tainos and some of the ceremonies they did, because there are I see a lot of flaws in today's Taino community a little bit, but it's okay, whatever rocks they boat. But the word, I'm trying to prove that the word Jibaro is not a Spanish term. It can actually come from more of a native terminology, a native word. But I'll look forward for that, and I guess that's it for today.